Chapter 1. Star-Crossed Lovers. Our story is a tragic story of love and hate. It's a story of love between two young people and hate between their two families. Hate between the Montagues and the Capulets. The Montague family and the Capulet family were two of the richest families in the beautiful city of Verona, but they hated each other. The heads of the two families hated each other. The children hated each other. Even the servants hated each other. Our story starts on a very hot day in the summer. Everyone was feeling very hot and very angry. Some servants from the Capulet family were walking across the main square in Verona. They were chatting. Suddenly they heard voices behind them. "Look, Capulet dogs!" the voices shouted. The servants quickly turned round. They saw a gang of Montague servants on the other side of the square. "Montague rats!" they shouted back. "Let's fight them!" The Montague and Capulet servants ran towards each other. "Fight, fight, fight!" they all shouted. The good people of Verona were all very afraid. Children stopped playing and ran away. People ran into their houses and closed their doors and windows. At that moment, a tall young man came into the square. The young man was Benvolio, Lord Montague's nephew. He hated the fighting between the Montague and Capulet families. He didn't like trouble. "Stop fighting!" Benvolio shouted. "Stop now!" The servants stopped fighting for a moment, but soon started again. Suddenly, Benvolio saw another young man run into the square. "Tybalt!" Benvolio shouted to him. "Help me to stop this fight! Help me to keep the peace!" But Tybalt was an angry young man, and he loved fighting. "Do you really think I'll help you to stop this fight?" Tybalt replied. "No way. I'm a Capulet. You're a Montague. There can be no peace between us." Tybalt pulled out his sword and attacked Benvolio. The two men started fighting like dogs. Soon more and more people came into the square to fight. Fathers and sons were there. Brothers and cousins were there. Servants and their lords were there. The noise of the fighting was terrible. "Oh, not again," said one old man. "I hate all this fighting. I'm going to find the prince. Perhaps he can stop them." He left the square to find the prince. When he arrived at the palace, he asked to see the ruler of Verona. "I need to speak to Prince Aeschylus immediately," he said. The prince soon arrived. "What is it, old man?" he asked. "Come quickly, my lord," said the old man. "The Montagues and Capulets are fighting in the streets again. Please stop them." The prince called his soldier. "Get my horse and come with me," he shouted. The prince and his soldiers went quickly to the square. The Montagues and the Capulets were still fighting when the prince arrived in the square with his soldiers and their horses. The sound of the horses was very loud. The prince was very angry. "Stop this now!" he shouted. "This is the third fight between Montagues and Capulets this summer. This fighting must stop. The people of Verona are afraid and unhappy." Then the prince made a terrible threat. "If there is another fight like this, you'll die." Everybody stopped fighting. The prince called the heads of the families. "You, Capulet, come with me. Montague, I'll speak to you later. Everybody else, go home, or I'll kill you all." The prince turned away with his horse and left the square. Lord Capulet followed him. Tybalt called his servants and went home. When the square was empty, Lord Montague called Benvolio. "How did the fight start?" he asked. "It was the servants at first," said Benvolio. "I tried to stop them. and when Tybalt arrived I asked him to help me, but he wanted to fight too, and he attacked me." "But where's my son?" said Lord Montague. "Where's Romeo? He wasn't at the fight," Benvolio explained. "I saw him walking this morning, but he wanted to be alone. I don't know why." "Yes, he seems sad," Lord Montague replied. "I don't know what the problem is. I've tried asking him, but he doesn't want to tell me." "I'll talk to him if you want," said Benvolio. "I'll ask him." "Thank you. That's a good idea. Look, here comes Romeo now. I'll leave you to talk to him." Lord Montague left the square too. "Hello, Romeo," said Benvolio to his friend. "Why are you so sad?" "I'm in love with a beautiful girl," replied Romeo. "I love Rosalind, but she doesn't love me." "Poor Romeo. Why don't you forget her? There are lots of other beautiful girls here in Verona." But Romeo was still very sad. "There's only one girl for me, and that's my lovely Rosalind. I'll never love anyone else." Lord Capulet returned home after his visit to the prince. He was pleased to see that a young friend, Count Paris, was at his house. Count Paris asked about Capulet's conversation with the prince. "The prince is a very fair man. He's angry with us. He's angry with the Montagues too. He's angry with all of us, and he's right," said Lord Capulet. "Lord Montague and I must learn to keep the peace. It's easy for us old men, but it's difficult for the younger ones." The two men went for a walk in the garden. Count Paris wanted to talk about Capulet's daughter. "Have you thought about me and Juliet? I still want to marry her," he said. "My answer is still the same, sir. My daughter is only 13, so she's still very young. But perhaps there's a way. There's a party at my house tonight. Come to the party and meet her. You can talk to her and dance with her. If she likes you, then you can marry her." "Thank you," said Paris. "I'll come to your party. I'll see you tonight." Lord Capulet went back into the house. He called his servant and gave him a list of names. "We're having a party tonight. Here's a list of people. I want them to come to my party. Go and find them and invite them to my house. Tell them to come for dinner and a ball tonight." "Yes, my lord, I'll go immediately," the servant replied. The servant left the house, but sat on the wall outside. "Help! What can I do?" he said to himself. "My lord doesn't understand, but I can't read this list. I can't read at all. I must find someone who can help me, someone who can read." At that moment, he saw Romeo and Benvolio, who were still talking in the street. The servant ran to them and said, "Please help me, sirs. Lord Capulet is having a party tonight. He wants me to invite the people on this list, but I can't read it. Can you help me?" Romeo took the piece of paper from the servant. He began to read Lord Capulet's list of names aloud. "Signor Martino and his wife and daughters, Mercutio and his brother Valentine, my uncle Capulet and his wife, my niece Rosalind, Signor Valentio and his cousin Tybalt." The servant was very happy. He thanked Romeo and then ran off to find the people on Lord Capulet's list. Romeo turned to Benvolio. "Did you hear what the servant said? Rosalind is going to the party. My beautiful Rosalind, my true love. I'd love to go, but what can I do? It's a Capulet party." "I know," said Benvolio. But Benvolio was thinking. He wanted Romeo to forget Rosalind. He wanted Romeo to meet some other girls. Then he had a clever idea. "Why don't you go to the party?" he said to his friend. "Are you crazy, Benvolio? They're Capulets, and I'm a Montague. How can I go to their party?" Wear a mask. No one will know who you are. Then you can see Rosalind and compare her to the other girls. Yes, that's a good idea. Then I can see my Rosalind. I'll go to Lord Capulet's party." At Lord Capulet's house, everybody was preparing for the party. Servants were cleaning the rooms, preparing the tables, and lighting the candles. The cooks were making a fine dinner. Juliet, Lord Capulet's beautiful young daughter, was in her bedroom. Her nurse was helping her to dress for the party. "Oh, I remember when you were just a little baby," she said. "Just look at you now. You're a beautiful young lady in your beautiful dress." There was a knock at the door, and Lady Capulet came into the room. She studied her daughter. "You're lovely, Juliet. Now that you're almost 14 years old, perhaps we should talk about marriage. How do you feel about getting married?" Juliet was a bit surprised by her mother's question. "Marriage is an honor," she said, "but I've never thought about getting married." "Why have you never thought about it? There are lots of married girls of your age in Verona. Some of them have children already." Lady Capulet stopped speaking for a moment. Then suddenly she said, "Now that we're finally talking about marriage, I've got some news for you. Count Paris came to see your father today. The Count wants to marry you. What do you think about the idea?" Juliet didn't answer. She was still a little surprised. But her nurse was very excited. "My Juliet is getting married." "Oh, you'll be so happy. Count Paris is a fine man. You'll have happy days and happy nights." "Yes, he's a very fine man," said Lady Capulet. "He's coming to the party tonight. You'll meet him then, Juliet, and I'm sure you'll like him." "I'll try to like him," Juliet replied with a heavy heart. Just then, there was another knock at the door. One of the servants ran into the room. "They're here, my lady. They're here. Your guests are arriving for the party. Dinner's ready." Chapter 2. A Rose by Any Other Name. Later that evening, Romeo and Benvolio were out in the street. They were dressed for the party. They were wearing their masks for the ball and were walking to Lord Capulet's house. Romeo's best friend, Mercutio, was with them. Mercutio wasn't a Capulet or a Montague. He was related to Prince Aeschylus, so he had an invitation to the party. He was a very good friend to have. He was almost always happy. He was funny, clever, and loved life. That night he was excited about the party and was dancing in the street. Romeo didn't feel the same. He looked sad. "Come on, Romeo. You dance too." "Oh, leave me alone, Mercutio. I don't feel like dancing tonight." "You're in love. People in love always want to dance. What's your problem?" "I don't want to go to the party. I think it's a crazy idea." Mercutio looked at Romeo. "But why?" "It'll be fun. You'll meet lots of new girls." "I don't want to go to the party and I don't want to dance. I had a dream last night." "Well, so did I," said Mercutio. "Oh, ha, ha. Yes, I'm sure you had a dream too, but mine was a nightmare. It was horrible," Romeo started to explain to his friends. He was worried because his dream was about death, and it made him think about an unhappy future. He didn't like it. Benvolio and Mercutio wanted to make Romeo feel better. They talked about love and happy dreams. They talked about girls and the party. They laughed and joked with him all the way to Lord Capulet's house. When they arrived, Lord Capulet was waiting in the hall. "Welcome, welcome, come in. Come and dance. Come and enjoy yourselves," he said to everyone. "I'm too old for dancing these days, but you young people must dance. Dance, dance." The musicians were playing, The servants were working hard. Some guests were dancing and other guests were chatting. Everyone was having fun, except poor, sad Romeo. He was looking for his Rosalind. Then suddenly he saw a beautiful girl on the other side of the room. When he saw her, he immediately forgot Rosalind. He called a servant and said, "Who's that girl?" "Which girl do you mean, sir?" answered the servant. "The girl over there, the loveliest girl in the room. Who is she?" "She's so beautiful. She lights up the whole room. She's like a bright star on a dark night. No girl here is as beautiful as she is. I've already forgotten Rosalind. This girl is my true love." The servant didn't recognize the girl, but unfortunately, someone else recognized Romeo's voice. Someone recognized that Romeo was a Montague at a Capulet party, that someone was Tybalt, the dangerous, angry Tybalt from the fight in the square. Tybalt immediately took out his sword. "A Montague here? An enemy here? I'll kill him!" "Tybalt, stop!" shouted Lord Capulet. "I don't want to fight in my house." "But uncle, this is Romeo, a Montague and our enemy. A Montague in your house. I'm going to kill him." "Stop now, Tybalt. Calm down. I know Romeo's a Montague, but he's not a bad young man. Leave him alone." Tybalt didn't answer. He ran out of the room. He was very, very angry with Lord Capulet and with Romeo. "I won't forget this moment," he said to himself. After Tybalt left, Romeo decided to speak to the beautiful girl. He didn't know her name. He didn't know that the beautiful girl was Juliet. He didn't know she was a Capulet. Romeo Montague was in love with Juliet Capulet. He went over to her. "I don't know who you are," he said, "but I know that I love you." "You're very handsome," she replied. "I think I love you too." Romeo kissed Juliet, and then they kissed again. They were in love. Juliet's nurse saw them. She was worried, so she called Juliet. "Your mother wants to speak to you. Go and see her now." Juliet went to find her mother, and Romeo asked the nurse about the girl. "Who is she?" he asked. "That's Juliet. She's Lord Capulet's daughter," replied the nurse. Romeo turned to his friend Benvolio. "Oh no, I'm in love with the daughter of a Capulet. Benvolio, what can I do?" Benvolio was surprised, and he was also quite worried. "Come on now," he said quietly to Romeo. "We have to go. It's dangerous here." The two young men quickly left the party. When Juliet was alone again with her nurse, she asked about Romeo. "Who was that man?" "That was Romeo," replied the nurse. "He's a Montague." "Oh no, I'm in love with the son of Lord Montague. What can I do?" said Juliet. When Romeo left the party, he said goodbye to Benvolio and walked into the street behind Lord Capulet's house. He needed to think. From the street he could see Lord Capulet's garden. It was a beautiful garden full of flowers and fruit trees. There was a high wall around the garden. He knew that his lovely Juliet was on the other side of the wall. He couldn't leave her now. He just couldn't leave her. He walked up and down the street again and again. He looked at the wall again and again. Then he decided, "I must climb the wall and be near her," he thought. He quickly climbed the wall and went into the garden. Meanwhile, Mercutio was also leaving the party. He saw Benvolio in the street. "Where's Romeo?" asked Mercutio. "Has he gone home?" "No, look, there he is," replied Benvolio. "He's climbing the wall into Lord Capulet's garden." Mercutio laughed and called to Romeo. Come on, Romeo. You're mad. Forget about Rosalind. She doesn't love you, said Benvolio. He'll hear you, and then he'll be angry with you. You're right. I don't want him to be angry. I want him to be happy. I want to see him laughing again. I know, but he's in love with Rosalind. His love's blind. Come on, let's leave him. I'm tired, and I want to go to bed. Benvolio and Mercutio left Romeo in the garden. They went home and went to sleep. They thought that Romeo was looking for Rosalind. They didn't know that Romeo was only thinking about Juliet, his Juliet. Romeo walked around Lord Capulet's garden for a while. He was happy just to be near Juliet. Suddenly he saw a light from a window in the house. He quickly hid behind a tree. He saw Juliet come out of her room. She stood on the balcony looking out at the garden. Juliet, my Juliet, he thought. She's so beautiful. She's as beautiful as the sun. This moon is nothing when Juliet's here, because she's like the sun. Her eyes are like stars in the night. She's mine. She's my Juliet. She's my love. Juliet didn't know that Romeo was in the garden. She was thinking about her kiss with him. She loved him too. Oh, Romeo, why are you a Montague? Why am I a Capulet? She said aloud. I'll change my name for you. My name means nothing to me now. Romeo heard Juliet. Shall I tell her I'm here? He thought. Yes, I must. Romeo called to Juliet. Juliet, I'm here, he said. Who are you? She answered. I'm no one. I haven't got a name. But Juliet recognized his voice. I know you. I know your voice. You're Romeo, and you're a Montague. What's a Montague? What's a Capulet? What's a name? Said Romeo. Think about this. A rose is always a rose. If you give a rose a different name, it'll still smell sweet. Do you really want to change your name for me? I'll change my name for you too. Romeo and Juliet talked and talked. They promised to love each other forever. Marry me, said Romeo. Yes, said Juliet, but how? My family will never allow it. I'll find a way, he replied. They talked some more. They talked all night. Suddenly, Juliet realized it was nearly morning. You must go, she said. It's dangerous for you here. I'm so sorry because I don't want this night to end. I don't want you to go, but I know you have to. Romeo promised again to find a way to marry Juliet. Early the next morning, Romeo went to see his friend, Friar Lawrence. The friar was a wise old man, and he was Romeo's teacher. He knew a lot about herbs, which he used to make medicine. He knew which herbs were good and which herbs were dangerous. When Romeo arrived, Friar Lawrence was working hard in his garden. Hello, Romeo. You're awake very early today. Yes, Father. I didn't sleep last night. I'm in love. Were you with Rosalind, my son? No, I don't love Rosalind. I never loved Rosalind. I'm in love with Juliet. I want to marry her, and I need your help. Friar Lawrence was a bit surprised. He was also a little angry with Romeo. One minute you love Rosalind, the next minute you love Juliet, he said. That's not right. Romeo explained his problem to the friar. When I was with Rosalind, I didn't understand love. Then, when I met Juliet, I suddenly understood everything. Juliet is my real love. The friar listened carefully, and he realized that Romeo really was in love with Juliet. He decided to help them. "Yes, I'll help you," he said. "This marriage is a good thing, and perhaps it'll stop all the hate. Perhaps Montagues and Capulets will be friends when you're married. Yes, I'll help you both." Chapter 3. A plague on both your houses. In the streets of Verona, Mercutio and Benvolio were looking for Romeo. "He didn't go home last night, you know," said Benvolio, "and there's a letter for him. I spoke to his servant." "Who's the letter from?" said Mercutio. "Tybalt." "Oh no, has Tybalt challenged him to a fight?" "Yes, he has." The two friends were worried about Romeo. Tybalt was dangerous, and Romeo was in love. He was a lover, not a fighter. Tybalt was an expert fighter. He was like a lion, the mad, angry lion. Romeo came round the corner into the street. He was smiling. "Ah, hello, Romeo. Where did you go last night? We lost you after the party." "Yes, I'm sorry. I had things to do." "That's okay, but you look happy this morning. That's a nice change. It's good to see the old Romeo again." Romeo laughed and joked happily with his friends. Then Juliet's nurse arrived. She was looking for Romeo. "Who's that fat old lady?" said Mercutio. "She's looking for you. Perhaps she's in love with you. Run, Romeo, run!" "You rude young man," said the nurse. "I must speak to Romeo alone. I have a message for him. Go away, you horrible teenagers." Mercutio and Benvolio went away. They were laughing. Romeo turned to the nurse. Mercutio was rude. "I'm sorry," he said. "Yes, Mercutio was very rude. I hope you aren't a rude young man, too. My Juliet is a lady, and she's very young. You must be kind to her." "I know. Of course I'll be kind. I love her." Romeo explained his plan to the nurse. "Tell Juliet to meet me this afternoon. Tell her to come to Friar Lawrence's house. We're getting married there. Oh, and tell her not to worry. Everything will be fine." The nurse ran home to Juliet. Juliet was sitting in the garden. She was waiting for news from Romeo. Finally, the nurse arrived. "At last you're home," said Juliet. "What did Romeo say?" "Oh, I'm tired," replied the nurse, "and I've got a headache. Let me sit down for a minute." "No, please tell me. Is the news from Romeo good or bad? What did he say?" The nurse sat down and said, "Well, I can see he's a handsome young man." "Yes, I know. He's very, very handsome, but tell me about our wedding." Finally, the nurse explained the plan, and Juliet left immediately. She ran to Friar Lawrence's house without stopping. Meanwhile, Romeo and Friar Lawrence were waiting for Juliet. Friar Lawrence was talking to Romeo about love and marriage. He told Romeo to look after Juliet and to be a good husband. As soon as Juliet arrived, Friar Lawrence started the wedding. After a few minutes, Romeo and Juliet were married. It was a secret wedding, but they were still married. Then Juliet went quickly home because she didn't want her parents to find out about her wedding. She went home to wait for Romeo. Back in the streets of Verona, Mercutio and Benvolio were chatting. Benvolio was worried. It was another very hot afternoon, and the Capulets were near. Benvolio didn't want any more fights. "Come on, Mercutio," he said. "It's dangerous here. Let's go home." "Are you afraid to fight?" Mercutio asked. "Anyway, it's too late. The Capulets are here now." At that very moment, Tybalt came into the street with his Capulet friends. He wanted a fight. "Where's Romeo?" he said. "I want to speak to him." Mercutio and Tybalt started to argue, and Benvolio tried to stop them. He was afraid of the prince, and he didn't want another big fight in the street. Mercutio and Tybalt didn't listen to him. They continued to argue. Suddenly, Romeo walked round the corner into the street. Tybalt saw him and forgot all about Mercutio. "Romeo, you're a Montague. I'll kill you," shouted Tybalt. But Romeo didn't want to fight. He especially didn't want to fight Tybalt, because Tybalt was Juliet's cousin. "No," said Romeo. "I can't explain, but you must try to understand. I love all Capulets now. I don't want to fight you." Mercutio was very angry with Romeo. He didn't understand. "You're afraid, Romeo. You're afraid to fight. You're afraid of Tybalt. Get out of my way. I'll fight Tybalt. I'll kill the rat." Tybalt and Mercutio started fighting. Tybalt was a better fighter than Mercutio. Romeo tried to stop them, but it was too late. Mercutio fell down. "I'm hurt," he shouted. "I'm hurt." Tybalt saw him fall and ran away. "Tybalt's killed me," said Mercutio. "He's killed me." "Why did you try to stop the fight, Romeo? He killed me when you tried to stop us. It's your fault. A plague on the Montagues, a plague on the Capulets, a plague on both your houses. I'm a dead man." "I'm sorry," said Romeo. "I'm so sorry. I only wanted to help." But Romeo and Benvolio knew it was too late. Mercutio died. Suddenly Tybalt came back into the street. "You've killed Mercutio!" shouted Romeo angrily. "And now I'm going to kill you!" Romeo was furious and attacked Tybalt. There was nothing Tybalt could do. Romeo killed him. "Oh no, he's dead!" cried Benvolio. "Run, Romeo, run! The prince is coming. He'll kill you if he finds you here." Romeo ran away. Prince Aeschylus soon arrived in the street. Lord and Lady Montague and Lord and Lady Capulet were with him. "I've heard Mercutio is dead. They say that Tybalt killed him." "But who's Tybalt's killer?" asked the prince angrily. Benvolio explained. He told the story of the fight to everyone. The prince listened carefully, but Lady Capulet was angry and didn't believe the story. "Romeo killed Tybalt," she said, "and Tybalt was a Capulet. Tybalt was my nephew. Romeo's a Montague, and so he must die." "No," said Lord Montague. "Romeo was Mercutio's friend. He killed Tybalt because Tybalt was Mercutio's killer. Romeo didn't start the fight. The fight was Tybalt's fault." "Stop this," said the prince. "I understand everything. My soldiers won't kill Romeo, but I'll send him away. Romeo must leave Verona immediately, and he must never come back. Do you understand? Romeo must leave Verona forever." Juliet was waiting for Romeo at home. She didn't know about the fight. She didn't know that Mercutio and Tybalt were dead. Then her nurse came into the room, crying. "What's the matter? Why are you so unhappy?" said Juliet. "He's dead," said the nurse. "He's dead." "What do you mean? Is my Romeo dead? How did it happen?" "No, not Romeo. Romeo's not dead," the nurse replied. "But he killed Tybalt. Tybalt's dead, and Romeo killed him." Juliet was very angry with Romeo because Tybalt was her cousin. Then she remembered the prince's threat. "But the prince will kill Romeo now. she cried. So the nurse explained, "No, the prince won't kill Romeo, but he has sent Romeo away. Romeo must leave Verona, and he can never come back." Juliet cried and cried, "But he's my husband. I can't live without him. I'll kill myself. I must be with him." The nurse was frightened by Juliet's words. "No, no," she said. "I'll find Romeo, I promise. I'll find him and bring him here to you." "Give him this ring," cried Juliet. "Tell him I still love him." The nurse went out into the street to look for Romeo. After the fight, Romeo ran to Friar Lawrence's house. Friar Lawrence told him about the prince's decision. "You must leave Verona," said the friar, "and you can't come back. If you come back, the prince will kill you." Romeo was very unhappy. "How can I leave Verona? How can I leave my Juliet?" he cried. "Without Juliet, I want to die." Suddenly, they heard someone outside. "Quick, hide," said the friar. Romeo ran to the friar's study, and he hid behind the desk. There was a knock at the door. The friar went to the hall and opened the door. Juliet's nurse was there. "Where's Romeo?" she asked. "I must speak to him. Juliet is very unhappy." Romeo came out of the study. "Does Juliet hate me now?" he said. "I killed her cousin. Number, she gave me this ring for you. You must come to see her," answered the nurse. "Juliet knows about the fight, and she knows about the prince's decision. She knows you have to leave Verona. She's crying and crying, but she can't live without you. She says she wants to die. You must go and see her." "Go to Juliet," said the friar, "but you have to leave Verona before morning. It's too dangerous for you to stay here. Tomorrow morning, you must go to Mantua. Don't worry, I'll send messages to you about Juliet." Romeo and the nurse ran to Lord Capulet's house. Romeo climbed the wall into the garden, and then he climbed to Juliet's balcony. Romeo and Juliet spent their sad wedding night together. Chapter 4. It was the nightingale. That same evening, Lord and Lady Capulet were downstairs talking about Juliet. Count Paris was with them, and they were making plans. "She's crying and crying," said Lady Capulet. "I don't know what to do. She's so unhappy about Tybalt." "She must get married," said Lord Capulet. "The wedding will make her happy again. Then she'll forget about Tybalt. Let's have the wedding on Thursday." Count Paris and Lady Capulet agreed. "I'll tell her tomorrow," said Lady Capulet. Very early the next morning, Romeo and Juliet were still together in Juliet's room. "I must go," said Romeo sadly. "The larks are singing and the sun is coming up. I don't want anyone to find me here." Juliet wanted him to stay. "But it's still dark. It isn't morning yet," she said. "That isn't a lark. It's a nightingale you can hear." Romeo knew that it wasn't true, but he stayed a little longer. Then Juliet's nurse arrived. "You must go. Go quickly," she said. "Lady Capulet's coming." Romeo kissed Juliet for the last time. He climbed out of the window and started his long, sad journey to Mantua. Lady Capulet came into Juliet's room. "How are you, Juliet?" she said. "I'm not well, Mother," Juliet replied. "Are you still crying about your cousin Tybalt? Well, stop crying about him. Romeo, his killer, is still alive. It's better to cry about that, don't you think? I want Romeo to die. I want someone to poison him," Juliet lied to her mother. "Well, you find the poison, and I'll find the man to do it," said Lady Capulet. Anyway, stop crying. I've got some good news. You're going to marry Count Paris on Thursday." "No, no," said Juliet. "I can't. I won't. I'm too young to marry Paris. I don't know him. I don't like him. I prefer to marry Romeo, and you know how much I hate him. I'll marry Romeo before I marry Paris." Lady Capulet was very angry. She called Lord Capulet, who was very angry too. Juliet cried and cried. She argued with her parents, but they didn't listen. "You'll marry Paris on Thursday. That's my final word," said Lord Capulet, and he left the room. "Oh, please, mother, help me," said Juliet. "Number, you'll marry Paris, and that's my final word too," said Lady Capulet, and she followed her husband out of the room. Juliet turned to her nurse to ask for help. "What can I do?" she said. "Marry Count Paris, of course," said the nurse. "Forget Romeo and listen to your father. Paris is a lovely man, and he'll be a better husband than Romeo." Juliet realized that the nurse wasn't her true friend anymore. "I can't trust her," she thought. "I have to speak to Friar Lawrence. He'll help me, and if he can't, I'll kill myself." Juliet went to see the friar. When she arrived, Count Paris was there. He was talking about his wedding. The friar was very worried because he knew that the wedding was impossible. "I don't think this wedding is a good idea," he said to Count Paris. "You don't know Juliet very well. You need more time." But Count Paris was sure. He wanted to marry Juliet on Thursday. He looked at the friar and at Juliet. "I'll leave you two to talk about the wedding," he said happily. When Friar Lawrence and Juliet were alone, they talked about the problem of the wedding. "You must help me," said Juliet. "I don't know what to do. I can't live without Romeo. I must be with him." "I think I can find a way," replied the friar. "Listen carefully while I explain." The friar told Juliet his plan. "You must be very brave. You must go home and prepare to marry Count Paris. Say that you're happy to marry him now. I'll make a special potion for you. Drink it on Wednesday evening. When you drink it, you'll go into a deep sleep and you'll sleep for 42 hours. Your body will be cold, so everyone will think you're dead. Your family will find you in the morning and they'll take your body to the church. They'll put you in the family vault. I'll send a message to Romeo and he'll come to meet us. When you wake up, Romeo and I will both be there beside you. Romeo will take you to Mantua." "That's a very good plan," said Juliet. "Give me the potion. My love for Romeo will make me brave, and I'll drink the potion on Wednesday night." "Good," said the friar. "I'll send a message to Romeo with my friend, Friar John." Juliet took the bottle and ran home happily. Back at Lord Capulet's house, everybody was very busy. They were all preparing for the wedding. In the kitchen there were 20 cooks who were working very hard. In the hall, the musicians were getting ready. Some of the servants were decorating the hall with flowers. Others were preparing the tables. Lord Capulet was giving instructions to everyone. Juliet came into the room and spoke to her father. "I'm sorry, Father," she said. "I was wrong. I'll marry Count Paris on Thursday. I'll be happy to marry him." Her father was very pleased. "Good," he said. "I'm happy you've changed your mind. We won't wait until Thursday. Let's have the wedding tomorrow. I'll send a message to Friar Lawrence and to Count Paris now." Juliet went to her room alone. When she was in her room, she looked at the potion. She was worried, and suddenly she didn't feel very brave anymore. "Maybe it's dangerous to drink this potion. Maybe it's poison," she thought. "Maybe I won't wake up. Maybe it won't work. Maybe I'll wake up early. Maybe Romeo won't be there. Maybe I'll wake up and see Tybalt's dead body. Maybe I'll see Tybalt's ghost. She was very worried. But then she thought of her Romeo, and she felt brave. She drank the potion and went into a deep sleep. The next morning, everything was ready for the wedding. Lord Capulet called Juliet's nurse. "Where's Juliet?" he asked. "She's late. Go and wake her up." The nurse went to Juliet's room. "Wake up, Juliet. Come on. Wake up, you lazy girl. You're very slow this morning." The nurse touched Juliet's hand. It was cold as death. "She's dead! She's dead!" the nurse cried. "My lord! My lady! My Juliet is dead!" Lord and Lady Capulet ran to Juliet's room. "What's all this noise?" they shouted. Then they saw Juliet. "Oh no! My beautiful daughter is dead!" cried Lady Capulet. "Her hands are cold. Her face is cold. There's no life in her!" cried Lord Capulet. At that moment, Friar Lawrence and Count Paris arrived. "Is Juliet ready to go to church?" asked the friar. "She's ready to go, but she'll never come back. Juliet's dead," replied Lord Capulet. "This is the worst day of my life. It won't be a wedding now. It'll be a funeral." "This terrible day, this horrible black day," said his wife. Count Paris was very shocked, and Juliet's nurse just cried and cried. Friar Lawrence spoke to everybody. "Juliet's now in heaven," he said. "Stop crying. She'll be happy there. Let's take her to the church and let's put her into the family vault." "Yes," said Lord Capulet. "Bring the wedding flowers. Put them with her. They'll be her funeral flowers. Take her to the church." They took the sleeping Juliet away. That morning, Romeo was waiting in Mantua. He was waiting for news about Juliet. He saw his servant arrive and ran up to him. "What's the news? How's Juliet? How's my mother? How's my father? Tell me everything." "I have terrible news, my lord," said the servant. "Lady Juliet is dead. I saw her body with my own eyes. They've put her in the family vault." "That can't be true. No, I don't believe it. Go and get my horse." "I'll go to Verona immediately," cried Romeo. The servant left. "What can I do?" Romeo thought. "I can't live without my Juliet. I'll buy some poison and I'll kill myself. I'll be with Juliet in heaven tonight." Romeo knew a poor old man who was an apothecary. He ran to the apothecary's house to buy some poison. "I want to buy some poison from you," he said. "I know you've got some. Please let me buy it." "No," said the apothecary. "I can't sell poison to you. It's too dangerous. You know it's not allowed." Romeo saw that the old man was very poor. "Look," he said, "here are 40 gold pieces. If I give you this money, will you give me the poison?" The old man took the money. "I'm very poor," he said, "so you can have your poison. I don't want to give it to you, but that's a lot of money. The money will help my family." Romeo paid the apothecary, took the poison, and left Mantua. Chapter 5. With a Kiss I Die. Back in Verona, Friar Lawrence was waiting for Friar John. He was waiting for news from Mantua. Finally, Friar John arrived. "Welcome home," said Friar Lawrence. "How is Romeo? Did you give him my message? Is he here yet?" "I'm sorry," replied Friar John. "I couldn't give him the message because I had some trouble on the way." "But why?" said Friar Lawrence. "What happened?" Friar John explained. "I stopped in a village near Mantua, but some people had the plague. No one could leave the village because the soldiers were stopping everybody. I never arrived in Mantua. I never saw Romeo." Friar Lawrence was very worried. "I must go to Juliet," he said. "She'll wake up soon and she'll be all alone. She'll be frightened. I must be with her when she wakes up. She can hide at my house until Romeo arrives." The friar ran to the church. Meanwhile, Count Paris and his servant were outside the church. Count Paris was leaving flowers for Juliet. He was very sad, and he wanted to be alone. "Give me some time alone with her," he said to his servant. "But tell me if you hear someone coming. I don't want anyone to see me here. I just want to be alone." The servant went away to watch. Suddenly he heard a noise, and he ran to Count Paris. "There's someone coming, my lord," he said. "Quick, hide," said the count. They hid in the dark, and they watched. Romeo and his servant were walking towards the church. They watched as Romeo gave his servant a letter. "Take this letter to my father tomorrow morning," said Romeo. "I'm very sad. I just want to die. Now go away. Leave me alone. I want to be with Juliet." Romeo's servant promised to leave, but he was worried about Romeo. He decided to wait for Romeo outside the church. He hid in the dark and waited. Just then, Count Paris came out of his hiding place. "Romeo, you're a dog," he shouted. "You killed Tybalt. My Juliet killed herself because you killed Tybalt." "Leave me alone," said Romeo. "I don't want to argue with you. Can't you see I'm a desperate man? I don't want to fight with you. I just want to die. Go away." But Count Paris pulled out his sword and attacked Romeo. Count Paris's servant was frightened, and he ran to find help. He ran to find Prince Aeschylus, and the soldiers. Count Paris wasn't a good fighter, but Romeo was. It was an easy fight for Romeo, and Count Paris quickly fell. "I'm a dead man," he said to Romeo. "You've killed me. Please put my body next to Juliet's. I loved her, and I want to be beside her." With these words, Paris died. Romeo carried the Count's body into the Capulet family vault. He saw the sleeping Juliet. She looked dead. Romeo looked sadly at her. "Why did you have to die?" he said. "You're so beautiful. Oh, my love, my wife. I can't live without you." Romeo drank the poison, and he kissed his lovely Juliet. "With a kiss I die," he said to her. Romeo fell down, dead. Friar Lawrence was running towards the church when he met Romeo's servant. "Is Romeo in there?" said the friar. "Yes," said the servant. "He's been in there for about half an hour." Friar Lawrence ran down the steps into the family vault. He saw Count Paris and Romeo dead on the floor. He couldn't believe his eyes. Then Juliet started to move. She was waking up. "Hello, Friar Lawrence," she said. "Where's Romeo? Where's my Romeo?" "Quick, let's go," said the friar. "I can hear someone coming. I'm sorry, but something terrible has happened. Romeo's dead, and so is Paris. But we must go quickly now. The soldiers are coming. We must go." "No, I can't leave," said Juliet. "You go." Friar Lawrence was frightened and ran away. Romeo's servant followed him. Juliet looked around the vault. She saw Romeo, and she saw the empty poison bottle in his hand. "Without you, I want to die. Why didn't you leave any poison for me?" she said, picking up the bottle. "Perhaps if I kiss you, perhaps you'll have poison on your lips. Then I can die with your kiss." Juliet kissed Romeo. His lips felt warm, but there wasn't any poison left on them. Outside, the soldiers were coming closer. Quickly, Juliet took Romeo's dagger. She fell down onto Romeo's body. She was dead. 2 soldiers came into the vault. They were shocked when they saw the 3 young bodies. "Something terrible has happened here. Look outside. Find the killers," they shouted. Then the other soldiers arrived. They brought Friar Lawrence and Romeo's servant with them. "We found these 2 men outside," said one of the soldiers. "They were running away." "Good," said his friend. "Let's wait for Prince Aeschylus." A few moments later, Prince Aeschylus arrived. Lord Montague and the Capulets were with him. The prince looked at Friar Lawrence. "Tell us what happened here," said the prince. The friar told the prince and the 2 families the whole story. He told them about the 2 young lovers. He told them about the secret wedding. He told them about the sleeping potion. Finally, he told them about the tragic problem with the message which never arrived. Everybody listened sadly. "This is all our fault," said Lord Capulet. He turned to Lord Montague. "Please take my hand. Our children loved each other. They died because of our hate. We must stop this hate now." "Yes," said Lord Montague, and he took Lord Capulet's hand. "So many people have died. Mercutio, Tybalt, and Count Paris. Last night my wife, Lady Montague, died of sadness. Now this final tragedy, this final woe, Romeo and his young Juliet." The 2 families decided to build a statue of the 2 lovers, a statue of Juliet with Romeo by her side. "This is a sorry story," said the prince. "Go away and think. Go away and think about what your hate has done. Think about Romeo and his Juliet. Think about Juliet and her Romeo, because," he said, "there never was a story of more woe than the story of Juliet and her Romeo.